Hey everyone, Hunter here again. Wanted to do a quick little tutorial today on something that I've been asked about a few times on how I do seams on my models. And that is actually a multi-part answer to that question, but here is one of the techniques that I use. I was sitting here this morning working on my little egg plane for the miscellaneous class at the shows. It's a little Hasegawa kit, neat little kit. Very simple, but it has its fit issues here and there, and one of them is a big seam down the center of it. So this is, since this is pretty much a quick and easy little build that I'm doing, I'm just using regular filler in this. So I thought I would give you a demonstration on how I do seams when I'm using a regular filler. I'm going to use the Evercoat, just one part spot and glaze putty. There's a lot of, different opinions on that, using two-part putties, using one-part putties, and for what I'm doing here and the size of the seam that I'm doing, this one-part putty will work great. It does shrink, but I can kind of show a way to do that that helps avoid having any problems later on. So it's a pretty easy process to do. I'm going to use a little piece of scrap plastic here that I have. And I'm just going to scribe a line in this. And basically what I'm going to simulate is the seam that you're trying to fill. So I'm just going to scribe a line down through the center of this piece of plastic. And that would be like when you put two halves of, say, this little plane together. This would be the two halves coming together. And not all the time is that stuff going to line up real good for you. So this is a little way that I found to make this a little bit easier and a whole lot cleaner. And I got a little bit of everything here this morning. Let me find the sanding stick that I'm looking for. Yeah, we'll go with this one here. I scribed that, so I'm just going to knock the raised edge off of it here, because if you're filling a seam, you wouldn't have a raised edge on here. You'd already have this sanded down a little bit. So I'm just going to knock this down real quick. And yeah, that's looking pretty good there. And I'm going to lightly run the scriber back through that, so I knock the sanding residue out of it. So this is what we have right now. As you can see, it's just a little line that I scribed through there if I can get the camera to work here today. Doesn't show up real good, but there is a line scribed down through there. So we're going to use that to simulate the seam. Now, I see a lot of guys that take their fillers and they'll put pictures up after they filled something, like a seam or something like that, and they've got filler smeared all over the model, and that's just it's not a clean way to do it. It's not a good way to do it. They're putting way too much filler on the model, and they're putting it in areas where it just gets sanded off anyway, so it's kind of, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. So a quick and easy way to do this is, if that is your seam right there, I take a little bit of, most of the time it's going to be Tamiya tape, because that's normally what I use. And just take a piece of regular Tamiya tape. Now you can do this with masking tape or anything really that you want to do it with, because it's not that critical of how good your masking tape is. So if you've got some cheap, dollar store masking tape or whatever, go ahead and use it for this purpose. It'll work great for you. I'll put that down, and it's right near the edge of the seam. It's back away from it a little bit. And you want to put the first piece down and then come over on the other side and keep about the same amount of distance away from your seam. And you don't have to be dead accurate, parallel with your seam. As long as you're in the neighborhood of it is basically what you're shooting for. And another good thing about doing this, if you have rivets or something on the model, say you have a line of rivets that's, away from this seam a little bit, this here will help a lot without, to keep from getting the putty all up against the rivets and stuff like that. This helps a lot. So now all we have is just the 2 pieces of masking tape ran down the side of the seam. And at that point, I'm just going to open up the putty here. And I usually do not go with the seam when I'm doing this technique. I will go and just kind of dot the filler down here on the tape. And I will drag the filler from side to side across the seam. And like I say, this is not hard to do, but it's a very clean way of doing this. And it looks kind of messy right now, but I'll show you what's going to happen here in a minute when we get ready to take the tape off. But what you want to try to do is you have to remember that you're filling the seam. That's the main thing. So as you're pushing this filler into, putting it on, push it down into your seam real good. And make sure you get a good bond down in there on your plastic. And then you just want to make sure that as you're filling this seam, that you get it the height of the thickness of your tape. So basically what you don't want to see is a groove down your tape. You want a full band of filler. Now what this would look like is, and let me get this the rest of the way there, and I'll hold it up here and show you what we got right now. Probably a little hard to see laying there on the bench like that. Let me stick the cap back on this filler here real quick. Okay. Now, this is what we have right now. Now, that is what a lot of the pictures that I see guys put on the, the forums and on the internet and stuff. This is what their seams look like when they put their filler on. And if that tape wasn't there, that's a whole lot of wasted filler and a whole lot of extra sanding that you have to do. Don't need to do that. With this tape technique, you will eliminate a lot of that mess. And when you're pulling your tape, do it just like you would if you're pulling for a two-tone paint job. You want to pull back and away from your filler. And that'll create a nice clean edge. And then just go to the other side and you want to do the same thing on that side. Just pull back and away. Just like that. And now I'm not throwing this on the floor down here. I got a trash can under my bench. So, and that's what we have. And as you can see, that's very clean now. And now all the sanding that you have to do is right there on that seam. Now the other thing is, people will talk about shrinkage with these one-part putties. Yes, that is true. They will shrink. They're lacquer-based products. So as the lacquer thinner evaporates out of them, they will get a lot, they will shrink drastically on you. So keep that in mind when you're using the one-part putties. Now, the thing that we've done here is your masking tape has a thickness to it. So if you fill the seam to the top of the masking tape, you're actually going to be higher than your seam, so it gives you some material to sand on. It also allows this material to shrink as it dries and still not be below the surface of the seam. You will still be higher than the seam even when this shrinks. And I would say on your lacquer putties, to be safe, you want to give them at least a couple hours to dry. So that's something that once you had this seam filled in this particular part, just sit it to the side and, just let it set. Don't mess with it for a couple hours. And then you can come back and sand this like normal, and you should not have a whole lot of issue with any shrinkage beyond that point. So hopefully that gives you a little quick idea there on, how to go about doing your seams and making them look a lot cleaner, especially when you're putting pictures on the internet and stuff. This looks a whole lot cleaner than it just smeared all over the model. So, and it also is going to work better for you. You use less material. It's less sanding to do. Just a much cleaner way to do it. So hopefully that'll help you out when you get to filling your seams. That's one of the techniques that I use. I also did a video on doing it with super glue, which is another technique I use. And I may end up doing one on the two-part putties that I use, which is also an Evercoat product. It just gets a hardener mixed in it. Same basic technique as this, just a different style of putty. Procedures are pretty much the same. It just doesn't shrink as much. So hopefully you can use this technique here and try it out and see how it, see how you like it and see if it works for you. And like always, if you have any questions or concerns, just leave me a comment on the video and I'll be more than glad to get back to you. So I'm going to leave you with that today. I got a couple more videos coming up, and I'm going to be working on 2 more today, and we should be having those up either about a night or probably midday tomorrow, something like that. So stay tuned for them. So I'm going to let you go now, and thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you later.